So good morning, and thank you for coming. I have been here since the very beginning of this conference, and I have heard a lot of things about definitions and concepts, and this is what I would like to address in this presentation. First of all, I took part in a session where we were defining smartphone addiction. And then I realized that no one knows exactly what is addiction about. What is addiction? When are you addicted? And now, right now, as an example, we were discussing digital skills. But what is digital skill? What does it mean? In another session, we are discussing IS leadership. But what is IS leadership? And another session, we are discussing IT governance. And a lot of guys, talked a lot about governance. And for one, governance seems one thing. For the other, governance seems another thing. And it's always quite difficult because if you don't know exactly what the construct is about, it will be very difficult to research this construct. And it happens a lot in the MIS area because we have to deal with very new constructs that are being developed. For instance, blockchain, Internet of Things, smart city, for instance. Smart city is a very badly defined construct. If you put 10 persons in a room and ask them, what is smart city about, and you are going to receive 11 answers. Well, this paper is about the definition of construct and the use of social representation theory. So it is so if you think so. It's a Pirandello sentence based on his Italian author. It is so if you think so. The social representation theory and the construction definition and MIS area in Brazil, but could be in Spain, it could be in Argentina, it could be all over the world, because in my opinion that the constructs in our area are very badly defined. So sometimes we are researching one thing that we do not understand exactly what is it about. And once you think one thing, the other thinks another thing, and the practitioners think another thing. So there is a normal gap between academia and the real world. Okay. I'd like to go ahead. So of course, it's a very formal presentation. Introduction. What is social representation theory? How can we use it? Social representation theory as a methodological approach. And the use of this social representation theory for construct definition in Brazil, I'll give you some examples on this. And finally, convert is a social representation theory. What's the future of this in our area? I like to change the approach of my research. So I have been here for 3 days, and most of the time I have seen, sorry about that, structural models, scales, discriminant validity, convergent validity, of Cronbach alpha. I mean, nothing against this. But, sometimes we need to ask for other approaches. There are some other approaches here, experiments and so forth, eye tracking, something like that. I saw some presentations. This is a new approach. Social representation theory is a theory that was created by Eugene Moscovitch. Moscovitch was born in Romania. And then he moved to France because he was a Jew. And in France, he developed this theory. He's a sociologist. But formally, he was a psychoanalyst. So social representation theory is a theory of psychoanalysis. And I will explain for you what is it about. So, just to give you some guidance, you don't need to read, but one of the major causes of rejection of papers in top-tier journals is that most of the time the papers do not address correctly the construct they intend to research. It's not an issue of methodology or methods used or so forth, but it's an issue of correctly defining the the construct you really actually you want to research. And construct is very important because construct is a concept intentionally and consciously invented or adopted for a specific scientific purpose. It's a conceptual abstraction of a phenomenon that cannot be really observed. So we cannot reduce construct as specific observations, but they are abstract definitions of categories of observations, and they must be very much robust in order we can understand exactly the same thing. Okay, so this is, for instance, I developed a paper I present here. Using social representation theory on the definition of CIO, Chief Information Officer. What is a CIO? For you is something, for you is another thing, and for is another thing, for the practitioner is another thing, for the academia is another thing. So I have a lot of opinions, and no one knows exactly what is a CIO, what do you have to expect from a CIO. Because if you don't know exactly what is a CIO about, how are you going to hire a CIO? And so we intend to use social representation theory to define in a better way the constructs. And of course, I will show that we can use, for instance, this approach, methodological approach, with other approach. Okay, so social representation theory was created by Eugène Moscovite in France, and to investigate how common sense is formed, organized, structured, and diffused within distinct human groups. The time Moscovite developed a social representation theory, the social psychology was applied in an individual way, just individual matters. And Moscovite said, no, the group is more important than the individual. So how common sense is created? How common sense is developed. And social presentations are developed aiming at understanding, localizing, adjusting the world, and being important in the daily life, as there is always need of knowing what a person or an object has to do with the world that surrounds, say. And so, of course, social presentation is defined an identity collectively. Because we do not live in a single way. We live together, for the good or the bad. But we are supposed to live in groups. So we must understand what the others are saying. I'll explain in a very practical way what is social representation theory about. Okay? I will ask you a question. I'm going to arise a word, just a word. And you have to give me the 5 words that are brought to your mind as soon as I have finished to pronounce the word. Okay? So I'm going to pronounce a word. And you are not allowed to think. All you have to do is, come on, give me the 5 words that are brought to your mind. So, sorry, but is that, I don't know anyone from Brazil, okay? Is there any other? You are not from Brazil, okay? And sorry, don't be worried because I'm not going to be offended, okay? Give me the 5 words that come up to your mind when I say Brazil. Big. Football. Come on, go ahead. Be sincere. Be sincere.
Related to business? No. In general, you asked me in general. For
general, yeah.
Yeah. So, green. And happiness.
Happy. He's a polite man. He's a polite man.
You wanted me to say corruption?
Yeah, okay, of course, corruption, bribery. He's a polite man. Yeah.
But that is related to many other countries. So.
Impeachment and so forth, a lot of things. Okay. Yeah. And this is social representation theory. Do that. with 100, 200, 300, 500 persons. Okay? And collect all the words and expressions. Put it all together. Try to create clusters. According to the frequency the words are evoked and the order the words are evoked. Because you usually evoke the most important thing firstly. Okay? Well, another example, for instance. Okay. Anyone here? Harvard. Harvard, come on.
Competitive.
Education.
Competitive.
Competitive.
I believe.
Ivy League. Then money. Okay. Okay, so this is the social representation. Everyone here has a social representation at everyone and everything. People that know me has a social representation of me. People I know here, I have a social representation of this guy. And the collection of social representations is exactly what I'm talking about. So, the social representation, how can we operationalize social representation? Social representation theory is totally French, okay? Totally French. It was created in France, and the French dominates the social representation theory, but is being spread all over the world. So, Jean-Claude Avery developed the central nucleus of the social representation theory. It's a framework of 4 quadrants. 4 quadrants. In one of these quadrants, you have the central nucleus, also known as central kernel. It's something that for all of us is totally attached to the expression or word I would like to have the social representation. So, something take for granted. For everyone here, Brazil sings football. Pelé, samba. But Brazil produces aircrafts, airplanes. Brazil extracts oil in a very, very, very deep level of sea. Deepest in the world. But no one will say that. Because we are not known, because we produce airplanes, because we are one of the most developed countries in oil and gas technology. No. People recognize us because we play football, because there is carnival, and so forth. So it's a social representation theory. And I'd like to present here, how can I operationalize this social representation theory? By using the evocation technique. The word's evocation technique. What's the word evocation technique? I develop a questionnaire. The best thing is to ask for the questions personally, but it's very complicated. So usually I develop a questionnaire, I put in a web, and I try to collect people, and I ask them to for instance, to put the words or expressions that come to their minds when a word is evoked. The best way is to do that personally, because in the computer you always can think about, okay, and personally know, as I did with you. Wow, what can I say? Okay, corruption, bribery. You could say corruption. Well, our countries have a lot of corruption. And all countries in the world, they have corruption. Corruption. The problem is not corruption. The problem is lack of punishment. It's not a problem. Okay. So the word evocation technique is based on that. And so after collecting the expression and words, I put it all together and I try to develop clusters. Clusters with similar expressions and words. So, for instance, I can start with 500. Imagine, for instance, 100 persons saying 5 words. So I will end up with 500 words or expressions. But put it all together, developing clusters, perhaps I will end up with 20, 22, 15, and 23 clusters. Because most of the words, some of the words are very similar. I can put it all together. For instance, money, power, competition, Harvard, for instance. Well, perhaps, okay, let's be here. Corruption, bribery, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's be here. Yeah. They are very similar. Okay, so you can do that, and you can categorize. I'll show the graphics, but it's much more important here. This is the Verger quadrant. Have 4 quadrants here. Here you have the average order of evocation. So have average order of evocation of each expression, and here you have the frequency of evocation. So you have to combine the frequency you evoke an expression with the order this expression is evoked. So for instance, and I have here to define, for instance, average order of evocations here, the median value of the frequencies here. You can read the paper because I will not go into details, I have no time to do that. But for instance, the central kernel, words that are very much evoked, greater than, equal of a value, so they are very much evoked, and they are evoked in first, second place, lesser than the average of the order of evocation. So for instance, here, the most important words that express the central nucleus. The central nucleus, the central kernel, totally attached to the expression I want to have, the social representation. Here is the peripheral system. Expression and words that are evoked, but the frequency is not very high, and they are evoked in the last positions. So these words here, they are, for instance, tradable. Okay, you can convince me that my country is not attached to football, and if you convince me, I will be fine. Okay. It's we call this tradable. Okay, tradable. And here, no. The central kernel is the structure of the representation. The structure of the representation. And for instance, after that, just to help me, after that we can understand and can do what we call an implicative analysis. What is an implicative analysis? An implicative analysis, I can research whether or not when you evoke an expression, you are going to evoke in the second place another expression, and if you are evoking the same expression she evoked, perhaps you are going to evoke in the second place the same expression. Well, what I'm trying to say, the implicative analysis tries to understand whether or not there is a sequence of evocations. For instance, corruption is always in the first place, and corruption is always before, for instance, the government, or something like that. So implicative analysis is a graph, and you can understand how the clusters are linked. And you can do that by using software. I use the software, for instance, to develop the quadrant. I use Evoke, it's a software created by Pierre Berger, it's a freeware. To develop implicative analysis, I can use Chic. Chic is not, unfortunately, it's not freeware. I have to pay for that. Use Chic. And so you can develop and create not just the quadrant, but also how the parts of the quadrant relate to each other. Interesting. Regarding Peru, this expression here turns up always before the other. Why? They are linked. So yeah, this is a very interesting. It's a kind of statistics, okay? It's a statistics. We call this implicative statistics. It's developed in France. The Americans know nothing about this. It's totally bit. You know the French. French people, they are very closed within themselves. Barely you are going to see a French here. Perhaps Emmanuel is here, but perhaps there are 1, 2, 3 French here in AMCIS. They have their own conference, their own congress, and they write to each other. They write in French. They hate writing in English, okay? And they develop a lot of interesting things that sometimes do not come to us here. So I would like to present finally here, and you can see in the paper, 2014, the article, CIO competence. What is it about? And then the CIO competence was compared to the extant existing literature. And we realized that there are a lot of gaps on what the literature talks is the CIO competence and what the practitioners and the industry think about CIO competence. Another, here, Marchisotti, cloud computing. What is cloud computing about? So we developed social representation theory. The quadrant is here. Then we went to the literature and realized there were a lot of gaps. So we are developing things that the practitioners are not using most of the time. They think another thing. For instance, come on, do the social representation theory to blockchain. In the first place, in the central nucleus, Bitcoin will be placed. Bitcoin, unfortunately, is totally attached to blockchain. Unfortunately, because Bitcoin, my opinion, is jeopardizing blockchain. Bitcoin is a coin that is used for the evil things, terrible things, unfortunately. And but today, for most of us, Bitcoin is blockchain. Blockchain is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not blockchain. Bitcoin is just an application of blockchain. Blockchain is much more important than Bitcoin. But if everybody here thinks that blockchain is Bitcoin, we are going to research blockchain as Bitcoin. Okay. And for instance, here, Teodoro, IT governance, what is it about? Cunha, aquele chama de Cunha, public participation, IT mediate, Valéria Salvador, IT governance, Gomes, portfolio management, what is it about? IT portfolio management, and Melon, what is IT project success? What is a success in an IT project? Oh, this project is successful. See, but what is it about? What is success? I'm successful. Okay, what is it about? I have money. Okay, but what is it? Well, for me, it's not success. Is not about it. It's about to be happy. No, for me, success is money. So I have a problem on definition of what is success about. Okay, and finally, just here, of course, the application can be used in replication studies. For instance, for example, we developed a study in Brazil. We use theoretical replication, and we compare and discuss critically the CIO core competence unveiled by multivariate statistical analysis. I developed a paper on this. Vis-a-vis the same construct obtained by social representation theory. Huge difference between them. So finally, social representation theory is a very, very, in my opinion, it has a great potential to be used, but of course there are drawbacks. First of all, it's difficult to have an unbiased, a random sample. Most of the time you have to use a sample of convenience, okay? Would you mind help me? Please help me. I beg you to help me. It's okay. Second, it's not very easy to develop clusters. Sometimes you end up with more than 500 expressions in the words, and you have to clusterize. Of course, the software can help you, but you are in charge of doing that. The software helps you, but it is not going to develop the clusters. It's up to you. Okay. And so there are some, and of course there are some bias. It's impossible unless I have a random sample that I can really ask for evocation of expression and words, and probably the results will be very, 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 very good. So this is what I would like to present to you. And I'd like to invite you, sorry about that, but to read the paper because the theory is not very complicated, it's simple, but it's a psychoanalysis theory. It was used to understand what the society thinks about things, and people, persons, countries, and other issues. So what people think about Chile, what people think about, for instance, AIS, what people think about AMCIS. Of course, AMCIS, people that knows what is AMCIS about. What is AMCIS about? What is AMCIS? What is AIS? Come on, give me your 5 words when I speak AIS. And we collect in that sense. So we can present AIS, what people think about AIS. And the AIS can understand whether or not it is fulfilling the mission and role he wants to be accomplished. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. Okay.
Okay, we can take a few questions, if there are any.
Yeah, thank you. All right, come on.
Very interesting way of getting the meaning of some of the construct in our discipline. I would like to know if you have done any analysis of the social representation theory, comparing comparing the meaning among different countries, for example, or regions, like developed countries and undeveloped countries, or according to one issue. Like if I think you were talking about smart cities, sure that smart cities in my country is not what we think in the US.
Well, at this moment in Brazil, I guess a student of mine, I do hope, she's developing this dissertation. I hope. She's trying to understand what is smart city about. Smart city, for instance, is an example, and we are using. Smart city is an expression created by IBM to sell computers. Smart city was created by IBM to sell computers. Well, okay. IBM needs to sell computers. And the academia always, as usual, embrace the concept and it starts to research the concept without knowing exactly what this concept about. Aurora last year, you presented a paper. You were awarded the best paper of the Congress about what is a smart city about, and a lot of definitions. So how can I ask a student of mine to develop a thesis, a dissertation, a paper on smart city if we don't know what is smart city about? It's about technology. It's about environment. It's about transportation. It's about green issues. It's about pollution. It's about safety. It's about what? If I don't know exactly what is smart city about, how am I going to research smart city? It happens a lot here. Well, I challenge you, go to a session after this, and you're going to see people defining concepts that really, they are very confusing. Very confusing. Yesterday, an almost debate. What is addiction? Smartphone addiction. Well, everyone here is addicted. Okay, but what is addiction? What is it? So we need to represent what is addiction. If I don't know exactly what, okay, but the theory says the addiction is okay, but the theory says, but the other guys, all of us here, think another thing. So the theory is say one thing and another thing. For instance, IT governance. I realize a very interesting thing. If you are in the industry and your boss, you are in the IT department, and your boss asks you a question that you don't know the answer, and you are in the IT department, and the CIO comes to you and say, "What is it?" And you don't know the answer. Okay. What do you have to answer? My boss. This is an IT governance issue. Come on. Because no one knows exactly what is IT governance. No one knows exactly what is IT governance about. So, as no one knows, you can see my chief, please. Come on, sit down. This is IT governance. I will solve it. He said, okay, it's IT governance. Why? Because IT governance is a concept badly defined. Like, for instance, digital divide. What is digital divide? Haves, haves not. For instance, I'm researching this. What is development? I research ICT for development. So I struggle to understand development. What is development? It's money. It's affluence. It's power. Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize, says that development is freedom. Freedom to choose whatever you want. Even to choose not to choose. Even to choose that I don't want money. Because I don't want. And this is development. And of course, the concept of development comes from the north. But I live in the south. And I have to develop my research complying with the north definition, or the northern definition of development. So for us, development is money, development is power. Is it true? I don't know. So of course, we need to develop our own constructs. In Chile, perhaps, there are own constructs. In Brazil, of course. And I guess we need to stop. We need to stop taking for granted that every construct is so easy to be defined. No, and most of the papers that are rejected in top tier journals, they are rejected because the construct is not very well defined. So you are researching one thing that you really doesn't understand what is it about, and the reviewer understands another thing. Doesn't matter the method, the structural model, okay, but the construct is badly defined. It's badly defined. So this is my opinion. Okay.
Joia, you mentioned already that one of the problems with this technique is that it's difficult to define the right sample, and if you get the wrong sample, you get the impression that that's what people think, and it's actually just that group.
Yes.
How are you dealing with that in your research?
Yeah, first of all, for instance, CIO competence. I cannot ask you, what do you think about CIO competence for a guy that doesn't know what is CIO, doesn't know what's competence, of course. He's supposed to understand what is it. So for instance, we developed our research on social competence, CIO competence, was developed encompass IT professionals. So IT professionals, they are supposed to understand what is a CIO and what are the competence CIO is supposed to have. So we try, of course, to find out samples that understand, at least in a minimum way, what we're talking about. For instance, if I ask you, for instance, tell me 5 words when I talk, for instance, Sri Lanka. Okay, well, Sri Lanka. Okay, sorry. Is there anyone here for Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka.
Island.
Take it out of this, okay. Well, okay, country, Asia. But okay. But if you, first of all, the first preconditions that you need to understand on a minimum basis what I'm talking about. What's leadership? IT leadership. Okay. But there are some other issues that perhaps you need to have people that understand. For instance, it's quite difficult to ask for my mother, what is IT governance? Well, she's 85 years old, and she's not an IT person. What's IT governance? I don't know. So of course, you need at least a minimum common base of understanding. What is he learning? It's another very important thing. What is he learning? Okay, the use of computers, Well, so there are a lot of challenges, but of course, first of all, and first and then last, I don't want to address in a very global way. I know that sometimes I have to look for the right sample, right people, but of course without bias. Otherwise, my research will be jeopardized.
I'm confused in a few things. For example, if there is something new, then very few people or basically nobody knows. So we still need to define. Maybe what we are doing also is, I mean, I understand your point of view, especially when we want to take our research into practice. Definitely we need to use the labels for the constructs appropriately.
Yeah.
So so not necessarily it's a problem of misdefinition. It could also be a problem of what label I'm using for my construct.
Yeah,
Could be.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it happens happening a lot. For instance, first of all,
Sure.
come on, go ahead.
That's one thing. Then the other problem is, what if there is something new? So I cannot use this. I actually have to give them the definition. In that case, actually things are much easier, because what I need to do with the people that I'm surveying or talking to in order to do whatever I do with my research, then what I need to make sure is that they understand what is my meaning. It's not what they build as a meaning. It's because they don't know. So if you have this thing and this thing means this, then okay, give me your opinion, your answers, etc.
Yeah.
There's no other possibility. They cannot build the definition, right?
I understand your.
So and then some other times the researcher wants to study something specifically. So it's not about what people believe or think about some concept. Like, for example, Bitcoin. Maybe what I should not do is use the term Bitcoin. Maybe I have to use some other label and give them the definition, so it's not attached to Bitcoin or blockchain or anything, and then I also solve the problem. But it's because my interest is in studying something. Of course, what I'm trying to study might not be applicable, useful in practical terms. That doesn't matter, but that's another story. That's about applicability.
Yeah.
And I also think that what you're saying, that many papers being rejected is because the definition is not clear, is not correct, is not necessarily. It's because there is a social representation for that construct. It's actually because they were not able to clearly articulate what they mean, or maybe it's because they are using the wrong label.
If you don't know exactly the construct, you
Right.
you are going to fail to define indicators, you're going to fail to measure, and so forth. I'll give you an example. I have a student, a master student of mine, that has just finished, gave me last week, and she's going to present to an advisory committee social representation of fintech. Do you know what's fintech? Why? Because, of course, it was difficult because he had to go to São Paulo, which is a financial center in Brazil, because fintech is not a very easy word to be recognized. It's impossible to ask for the janitor there, what is fintech about? Or the guy that cleans my room, what do you think about fintech? Sorry about know that. So he has to go to São Paulo. But what happens? The academia is already developing papers on fintech without knowing exactly the definition, the concept. And what happens? In the future, in the very near future, the academia will take this way, and the industry will take this another way. And at the end, what will happen? There will be a gap here between what the practitioner industry thinks about, for instance, fintech, and what the academia is researching on fintech. It happens a lot in our area, because our area, MIS area, we are creating a lot of constructs. Come on, pay attention. For the last 5 years, we're developing Internet of Things, IoT. What is it about? It's about sensor, actuators, GPS, technology, privacy, people. So if I don't know exactly what is Internet of Things about, I have a problem. You are researching Internet of Things, I'm researching Internet of Things, but our research has nothing to do with one another. So we are researching the same subject, but for me and for you, they are different concepts.
But not necessarily the same subject. It's probably that somebody's using the wrong label.
Absolutely, but
Right?
when
So that's-
but when 1,000 persons are using the wrong label, there is something wrong with the label. So at least we need to label the things in a better way.
And that's why I think that's the reason really why journals are rejecting many papers because they are using the wrong labels.
Well, the first session I took part here. I am associate editor of the Journal of Knowledge Management. The first session here. The guy was presenting a paper on knowledge sharing, and I know that. But knowledge sharing is the same thing of knowledge transfer. I made this question.
Sure.
You confuse me. Knowledge sharing is knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer. So come on. Let's first define what is knowledge sharing and what's knowledge transfer. And if they are the same thing, because I received papers that talk about knowledge sharing. The same papers talk about knowledge transfer. And there are papers that talk about knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer in the same paper. And there are papers that say that knowledge sharing is not knowledge transfer is not knowledge sharing. So we need to understand what is it about. And the terrible thing, we are not researching things because of ourselves. I suppose that I am doing my research to the society, is my opinion. If the society doesn't understand what I'm researching, what is the relevance of my research? New. And it's a problem. We academics, we research a lot of things. And the industry doesn't understand our research because they don't understand our constructs. They have defined other constructs, they are using other definitions. And we are here publishing papers, top tiers, okay, points, tannery, but what's the difference we are doing in the world? I don't know. Exactly because there is a gap in the social representation of the constructs, for instance, one of the reasons.
We need to end the presentation. Probably we can take just one more question. Also, if it's a quick question.
Well, present the issue about social representation theory. But what you really do with the words, that the important words, to come back then, to return them to the context. So Bitcoin appears near blockchain and so on. How do you take out with the words and how do you return to the context?
I have just, I guess that my mission is just to show that, for instance, there is a confusion between concepts. Blockchain is not Bitcoin is a subset of blockchain, and present it to the academia. The academia will try to show it. It's an opinion. I can, my mission, for instance, is to present and research things like that. But I cannot solve this. So I just present because I'm not in charge of developing a social representation theory. It is developed. Not because I want or I do not want. But what I can do, I can research whether or not this social representation theory, the social representation is okay with the practitioners, with the society, and so forth. And academia should understand that most of the time we are researching and defining constructs that for the industry, the people, the society in general, they are totally different. So we need to be closer to this reality. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.